The RAND group, R-A-N-D, RAND, is it a think tank? Sort of a think tank situation, I think. But they had an article on Russian propaganda and how they're doing it. Kind of interesting. So apparently the Russian propaganda method is not to be surgical. So they're not coming up with like the perfect meme or the perfect rumor. They're just flooding the zone with bullshit so that you can't tell what's true. And apparently it's working. So the Russians are just, it's just overwhelming, continuous, but it's also inconsistent. So even the messages they give are not all the same because they don't care what you believe. They want to overwhelm you. This would be the RAND point of view. Now that's interesting, isn't it? They're not trying to persuade you necessarily. They're trying to wear you out. So you can't tell what's true. Because if you can't tell what's true, you can't act on it. And that's as good as anything else. So they're just trying to make America ineffective. They don't need to make us believe a specific thing. They need to make us not believe anything. And then we're toast. But here are some other persuasion-related things from RAND that I thought were worth mentioning. Now, this is based on experimental psychology, so this is tying the technique to actual scientific studies. And RAND says, the experimental psychology literature tells us that first impressions are very resilient. So the first thing the Russians do is they flood the zone with their own rumors, false stuff, before you've seen the correct reporting on something. Because your first impression is really sticky. So that's the first thing they do right. And I would agree that that's good form. It says an individual is more likely to accept the first information received on a topic just because it's first. So that's the same thing. When faced with conflicting messages, right? So if you have more than one message, they're going to favor the first one they heard for no logical reason. Just going first matters. All right, and furthermore, repetition leads to familiarity. The more you repeat the fake news, the more people will believe it because they say, oh yeah, I've been hearing that. Everybody's saying that. That's probably true. Couldn't be so many people saying it if there's nothing to it. So be first, repeat it until people think it's familiar. Then the illusory truth effect is well documented. This is where people raise statements as more truthful and believable when they're new statements. Those statements previously, then when they were new. So a new statement will be considered, a little bit sketchy, but if they keep hearing it over and over again, there's nothing else that happens. They'll start to believe it just because they keep hearing it. But I guess you knew that. When people are less interested in a topic, they're more likely to accept familiarity. So if you don't know much about it, whatever you hear the most is going to be your truth because you haven't looked into it. Consumers save processing, resources. In other words, their brains don't work so hard because they use a frequency heuristic, a rule of thumb that if they've been hearing the same thing over and over again, that it must be true. And of course, that is weird. Even with preposterous stories and urban legends, those who have heard them multiple times are more likely to believe that they're true. So no matter how ridiculous the story is, if you hear it enough, you think it's true. And that's all it takes. And by the way, this is all stuff that hypnotists all know, right? This is hypnosis 101 stuff. So none of this is surprising to me, but maybe some of you. If an individual is already familiar with an argument, they process it less carefully, right? So if you've heard the argument, you don't rethink it. You just say, oh, yeah, that old argument. So your brain doesn't click in again once you've decided what's going on. All right. And let's see. So it's high volume, continuous stuff. I guess the Russians also they use fake accounts that look like they're on your team. So if you saw a fake account that was all MAGA, pro-Trump, American flag, and it says, oh, Bigfoot is real, and you also are in that same camp, you're a MAGA-loving person, you can say, oh, this MAGA person, I trust them. They say Bigfoot's real, so I think so too. So that's part of how they do it. All right.